Rain doesn't wash away secrets on a prairie night. Amos what muttered, his breath fogging the lantern's glow as he crouched beside the collapsed figure on his threshold. The woman lay in a tangle of lace and dust, skirt soaked through, eyes fluttering like moth wings. By the time Amos staggered back into his cabin to fetch a blanket, her shallow breaths whispered of desperation and untold stories. But let's go back to where this tale truly took root. 2 days earlier, the rancher's door stood silent under an indifferent sky. Jacob Red McAllister, a man as weathered as the varnished saddle he polished, knew little of fate beyond cattle drives and hay season. His ranch hovered on the edge of the Badger Hills, a fortress of split-rail fences and gnarled cottonwoods. The soil here held the ghosts of promises and broken vows. Every sunrise carried the weight of a world hungry for justice. Red rose with the dawn, the horizon a thin ribbon of rose and gold. He saddled his sorrel mare, Ember, and rode along the creek to inspect fresh barbed wire. His spurred boots whispered against Ember's flanks as he dismounted near a flooded ford. The creek's roar masked the faintest snap of twigs behind him, a sound so quiet Red thought it might be his heartbeat. He turned, spotting her then. A glimpse of white in the willows, a fluttering veil snagged on a branch. His hand hovered above his colt. She stood there, drenched from the waist down, her gown tattered where thorns had shredded the train. Moonlight, or what little remained of it, caught the battered bouquet clutched in her hand. Wilting roses, their petals bruised as though echoing her own plight. Red called out softly, "Ma'am, you're far from any chapel at this hour." His voice carried the hush of respect. The woman froze, then sank to her knees, head bowed. She spoke no words, only tremors that betrayed exhaustion laced with terror. He approached with caution. The fragrance of her perfume, a mixture of rosewater and something faintly metallic, wafted in the damp air. Red knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You need aid. Are you hurt?" She lifted her face. Moonlight revealed hollow cheeks and eyes too wide for innocence. She fought to speak, lips parting like a bird's beak. Finally, she croaked, "They took everything." Red noted the splinters of terror in her eyes and the way her fingers gripped the hilt of a dagger strapped to her ankle. He helped her to her feet, offering his coat. "Let's get you back to the ranch," he said. "I'll fetch Amos. He's the best with splints and blankets." She trembled, nodded once, then limped the 30 paces toward his homestead. Ember whickered from her stall, and Red felt a prickle of foreboding as the dogwood door creaked below the porch. The porch light spilled amber warmth onto the boards, and for a moment, Red imagined sanctuary. Only the wide, dark horizon beyond reminded him the West rarely forgave mercy. He settled her at the kitchen table. The planks under her elbows bore the scars of spilled whiskey and children's drawings. He thrust a mug of warmed cider into her hands, watching as she drank with both relief and suspicion. Her dress dripped onto the floor, pooling like a pale blossom. Red's boots squelched against the rug as he paced, searching for answers in the rising steam and the crackle of the hearth. "I'm married," she said at last, voice ragged. "They, my groom, ambushed the carriage, took my dowry. I escaped, but there was blood." Her words halted like stray cattle in a stampede. Red felt guilt flare. He'd invited this danger onto his land. Yet the helpless tilt of her chin steeled him. No woman deserved to collapse on a stranger's doorstep. Amos arrived with a blanket and Sawbones kit strapped across his shoulders. He crouched beside her, gentle as a summer breeze. "Let's tend to that ankle," he murmured, unwrapping linen with careful hands. As he splinted the fractured bone, she flinched at each twist. Red lingered by the window, scanning the valley. Distant coyotes sang their lament, and storm clouds gathered along the hills like silent judges. Once Amos finished, Red handed them both supper, fresh biscuits, salted ham, and sweet corn. The woman nibbled sparingly, eyes darting between the door and the window. At last, she whispered, "I'm Eleanor Weston." She offered a trembling hand. Red took it, warmth spreading despite the chill in the room. Eleanor's gaze held stories the West seldom told. silk-lined ballrooms in New Orleans, an ungodly wealth she never asked for, and a marriage arranged to bind fortunes, not hearts. Now, that same fortune had become a chain, and her wedding day had turned into a nightmare of betrayal and violence. Red listened in the semi-dark, firelight painting shadows on Eleanor's face like brushstrokes of sorrow. Her tale unfolded. A wedding procession ambushed by masked men demanding gold coins and heirlooms, her father's legacy. The groom, a young banker named Thornton, had tried to fight, only to fall to a bullet. The thieves, believing Eleanor complicit, left her for dead. She'd gathered her wits, stumbled into the night, and found the one homestead between her and the next town. The wind rattled the window panes as Red settled beside her. "You'll stay until you're safe," he said. The words felt heavy, tethered to a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Outside, lightning flashed across the Badger Hills, illuminating the endless expanse where law and cruelty roamed in equal measure. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Why do you help me?" Red paused, tracing the grain of the table. "Because some debts you pay with heartbeats, and some promises you keep, even when the thunder rolls." He stood and looked at the door. "Tomorrow I'll ride out, find those men, bring justice for Thornton, and for your dowry, if it still exists." She met his gaze, fear and hope warring in her expression. "I don't want vengeance," she said. "I just want truth." Outside, thunder rumbled, a distant drum heralding storms to come. Red nodded, stepping toward the hearth. He poured a second mug of cider and handed it to Eleanor. "Then we'll find the truth. No blood spilt more than needed." As the storm broke overhead, rain pattering on the tin roof, Red stood sentinel at his own threshold, a rancher turned guardian, bound by honor to a bride he barely knew. He didn't yet understand the cost of his promise, nor the hidden debts carried on Eleanor's trembling shoulders. But as lightning split the night, he vowed to see her through the tempest, no matter how fierce the gale or how deep the shadows in which truth hid at sunset. He awoke before the sun, the sputter of coals in the hearth his only company. The storm had washed the world clean, turning ruts to rivers and painting the plains a muted gray. Red McAllister dressed in silence, wool shirt, leather vest, boots still damp from yesterday's ride, then stepped outside. Dawn had not yet broken, but Eleanor had already roused. She stood on the porch, shawl drawn tight, watching him. Her ankle was steadier now, but still fragile enough to buckle under distance. "I'll be back by nightfall," he said. She nodded, eyes wary. "Be careful," she whispered. "They won't take kindly to strangers meddling in their affairs." Red offered a curt smile. "Neither do I." He saddled Ember with quiet efficiency, loaded his rifle and revolver, and secured a bag of provisions. Then he swung into the saddle and rode north, following the creek that widened into marshy flats. The world smelled like wet sage and fresh beginnings. Yet beneath that lay the stench of fear, of corpses left unburied and promises discarded like spent shell casings. By mid-morning, he found the remnants of the carriage. Splintered wood, crushed wheels, silver fragments glinting in puddles. Bloodstains stained the mud, half washed away. He dismounted and crouched, running his finger through the grit. The print of a woman's boot, small and narrow, pressed into the earth. He closed his eyes, letting the wind whisper clues. Distant hooves, a man's ragged curse, the echo of women's panicked sobs. He followed the trail west, Ember plodding through ankle-deep water. Red's mind drifted back to Eleanor's trembling voice, pleading for truth, not vengeance. She'd insisted she didn't want blood, but justice. He respected that. Vengeance turned men into beasts. Justice required more restraint, more risk. He reached a cluster of pines where broken branches and footprints converged. There, a small group of travelers huddled around a sputtering fire, 3 men and a woman. Their clothes hung in tatters, one man in a banker's waistcoat, another in a drover's duster, the third in a miner's flannel. The woman sat on a stump, head in her hands. Red recognized her, Eleanor's maid, judging from the similar embroidery on her collar. Red rode forward and called out, "I'm not here to rob. I'm looking for the men who attacked your party." The group froze. The banker, his face gaunt, mustache singed, scrambled up. "You're a miracle, stranger," he gasped. "We thought we'd never see help." Red dismounted and approached the fire. The drover rose, eyes wary. "Where's the girl, sir?" he said. "She collapsed hours ago. Needed a doctor." Red's heart tightened. He nodded. "I'll fetch one. But first, you tell me what happened." They exchanged glances. The banker spoke. "We were ambushed just before sunset. Men in masks, rifles at our heads. They wanted the dowry, gold coins, jewelry, everything we had. Thornton tried to protect Miss Weston. Paid for it with his life." He swallowed. "They rode off with the chest." Red's jaw set. He crouched beside the woman. "You look after her. I'll track these thieves." The drover, Callahan, from his accent, spoke up. "Sir, if you ride after them now, you'll be walking into an organized gang. We counted 9 riders, well armed." Red met his gaze steadily. "I'm the only law out here." Callahan's shoulders slumped. "Then we ride with you." Red shook his head. "No. Your priority is the girl's safety. Eleanor needs care." The banker, young Thornton's cousin, Red learned, stepped forward. "I have a wagon. We can shack up at Miller's cabin, a mile west. Then I'll ride with you at first light." Red considered. Take men now, risk Eleanor's safety with no one at the ranch, or wait and risk the trail growing cold. Justice demanded he act. But compassion dictated he not abandon the wounded woman. He breathed deep. "All right," he said at last. "You'll stay with your party. I go alone." They nodded, reluctant. As Red mounted, he paused. "If you see riders, flag me down. And keep Mrs. Weston dry." He urged Ember into a trot, pushing north along the ridge where broken scrub and shale revealed distant hoofbeats. By midday sun, he reached a rocky outcrop stained with graffiti of bullets. Clearly camp. He slid from the saddle and scanned the gullies. There, a fire pit cold, rifle propped against a boulder. He crouched, checking shell casings, Winchester .45, fresh. Red followed the prints around a bluff. The gully narrowed, walls rising like sentinels. He crept forward, heart pounding until he saw them. For men, masks off, but their eyes cold. One held the chest, iron-bound, half sunken in the mud. Their laughter echoed. He slipped behind a boulder, rifle leveled. "Drop it," he called, voice low and even. They spun. The chest clattered. Bullets kicked up dust around Red's feet. Ember's whinny drifted through the gully entrance, where Callahan and the banker emerged, rifles raised. The outlaws snapped to guard positions, circling. Red stepped out. "No one needs to die today." An outlaw spat. "You alone? Maybe foolish, rancher." Red nodded. "Maybe, but I shoot to warn first." He fired a shot low, embedding a slug in the boulder's face. Sand sprayed. The outlaws flinched. Callahan and the banker moved to flank, cutting off escape. Red pounded the dirt with his boot. "We let them go. You hand over the chest, Miss Weston's dowry, and we'll pretend this never happened." Silence. Then the one with the chest hesitated, glancing at his 3 partners. "How do we know you'll hold to your word?" Red's eyes never wavered. "Because I aim poorly the second time." After a charged moment, the man dropped the chest. Wimpy protests rose but died under Red's steady aim. They backed away, surrendering ground. Callahan cuffed the chest and handed it to Red. Red swung it open. Inside, glinting coins, necklaces, a small box of family letters, heart-shaped locket at its center. He nodded at Callahan. "Take your property home." The 3 men mounted, their faces ashen. They rode off into the sun-blanched plains without another word. Red closed the chest and turned to the bankers. "We need to get this back," the banker said. Red nodded. "Tonight." He wiped sweat from his brow. "Let's ride." But in the depth of his chest, he felt the first ugly knot of doubt. Had he risked too much? Was justice worth the gamble? He glanced north toward the Badger Hills. The shadows of the past still clung there, waiting for sunset's reveal. You said, next. ChatGPT said, thought for a couple of seconds. The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting Eleanor's upturned face in amber warmth. Red set a plate of fresh cornbread and stewed peaches before her, but she didn't touch a bite. Her eyes, bright with unshed tears, traced the knife's worn handle as though it held the answers to all her questions. "Why did you risk your life for me?" she asked softly, voice trembling like the summer heat on the porch. She pressed her palms against the tabletop, knuckles white against the wood grain. "I'm a stranger, and you've given me sanctuary, medicine, and now justice. What do I owe you?" Red leaned back in his chair, boots scuffed by today's ride. He folded his arms, studying her from across the narrow table. He'd expected fear or gratitude, but not this raw, aching vulnerability. "Nothing," he said at last. "Not worth the cost. But no woman should collapse on a man's doorstep, left to bleed or starve. I did what I would have wanted done for my own sister." Eleanor's eyes flickered, as if trying to contain a storm. Outside, Ember stamped softly in her stall, uneasy at the tension in the house. Red stood and crossed to the window, gripping the sill. He watched lanterns flicker to life in the distant barns, heard the low cry of his dog, Huck, padding along the porch. She rose, abandoning the cornbread. Her ankle still ached, bandaged in crude linen, but she moved with newfound resolve. Eleanor stepped beside him, voice low and determined. "I cannot rest until I know what brought me here," she said. "Not just the thieves or the ambush or my groom's betrayal, but why I survived. There must be a reason I collapsed where I did." Red's jaw tightened. He felt her gaze on his back, caring yet insistent. He would have brushed aside such questions, but something in her tone, a quiet steadiness born of trauma, compelled him to look inward. He turned, meeting her eyes. "Maybe I've been chasing reasons all my life," he said. "My ranch, my fences, my lonely rides, always hunting a purpose I never found." Eleanor's lips trembled into a sad smile. "And now you'll hunt for truth for me, too?" He nodded slowly. "I promised you justice." He paused, as if weighing the next words. "But truth sometimes demands more than a bullet." She stepped closer, fingers brushing the brim of his hat. "Then let me help. I know people, families in New Orleans who owe me favors. I can send word, pull strings. We don't have to do this alone." Red's heart thumped with both gratitude and hesitation. For months, he'd carried the burden of his solitude like a shield. Now a woman, broken yet unbowed, offered to stand at his side. He swallowed. "You'll be in harm's way." Eleanor squared her shoulders. "Only as much as you already have me." He exhaled and reached for her hand. Her skin was cool against his calloused palm. In that touch lay more than thanks. It spoke of shared purpose, of two souls forged in pain, choosing to walk forward together. They spent the twilight hours poring over what little they'd learned. The cryptic scrawls on stolen letters, the banker's trembling testimony, the maid's whispers of masked men calling themselves the Ravens. As candles guttered, Eleanor read aloud passages from her father's correspondence. Mentions of business rivals who'd sworn to ruin the Weston fortune, hints of debts unpaid and threats whispered in parlors far from the Badger Hills. Each revelation tightened the knot of conspiracy. Thornton's life had been collateral in a game of greed. Weston gold diverted into pockets of strangers. Promises abandoned when the coin ran dry. And when the banker rode off, he'd left a trail of clues that only Eleanor, with her intimate knowledge of her family's affairs, could unravel. Red listened in silence, absorbing the enormity of her burden. He realized that justice was not simply driving outlaws from a gully. It was tearing away layers of deception, unveiling truths that powerful men would kill to keep buried. Outside, Huck barked once, sharp. Red rose, Henry rifle in hand. Eleanor followed to the door, the hem of her skirt brushing the threshold. In the dusky yard, Jonas stood by the corral, face drawn. A lone rider approached. The banker's cousin, Callahan, mounted and solemn. Red stepped forward. Callahan dismounted, boots sinking into soft earth. "We've found more," he said. He produced a ledger, mud-splotched but legible. "They meet 2 nights hence at Blackthorn Creek. We counted 8 ravens armed and ready. They'll finalize the sale of your dowry and any evidence you carry." Eleanor's breath caught. She gripped Callahan's arm. He laid a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We'll be there," she said, voice firm. "I want to see my father's enemies face to face." Red stared at her, conflicted. The plan meant riding into a trap, but doing nothing would let the ravens vanish with both her dowry and the truth. He squared his shoulders. "Tomorrow night, then," he said. "We ride to Blackthorn. I'll bring my rifle, but you'll have a pistol too, if you can manage." Eleanor's eyes glowed, gratitude mingled with steel. "I've learned enough with a needle and thread," she said. "I can learn with steel and fire." They rode out past midnight, under a canopy of stars unblinking and cold. Eleanor, garbed in Red's spare duster, sat astride Ember's mare, pistol strapped to her belt. Red led, Jonas and Callahan flanking. The night air tasted faintly of danger. Each hoofbeat was a drumroll toward a reckoning. At Blackthorn Creek, the ravens gathered around a lantern-lit fire, exchanging heavy chests and furtive glances. But they hadn't counted on the bride who'd collapsed on a stranger's doorstep. As Red and his few rode low into the clearing, Eleanor slipped from the group, pistol in hand. She stepped onto a fallen log, silhouette framed by firelight. "Your harvest of lies ends tonight," she called, voice ringing clear across the dark. The ravens spun, surprise and fear flashing in their eyes. Red leveled his rifle. Jonas and Callahan emerged from cover, revolvers smoking. The ravens hesitated. A single misstep, and they would all be lost. Then Eleanor spoke again, softer this time. "You stole more than gold. You stole my family's honor. I demand the truth of why you did it, and the ransom your pockets still hold." The leader, a tall man with a hawk's gaze, steps forward, voice gravelly. "We did it for coin and a promise that never came. Your father's debts were paid to us. Thornton cost more than he was worth." Eleanor's pistol wavered, tears glittering. Red's rifle wavered too, though at them. He could have fired. The law would claim he stood against thieves. But he saw in Eleanor's face something more precious than vengeance, a hunger for closure. Eleanor lowered her pistol. "Then return every cent," she said, voice breaking, "and tell my father what truly happened." She stepped down from the log, each movement revealing the frailty beneath her resolve, and the steel beneath that frailty. "If you won't, then we leave you to the law." In the hush that followed, the ravens exchanged glances. One by one, they tossed coins and letters onto the log. Callahan gathered them, nodding. The leader spat. "We've no quarrel with you. Take your due and ride on." Red holstered his rifle. He glanced at Eleanor, marveling at her courage. She wiped her tears and folded herself into the little party. As the first tendrils of dawn curled over the trees, they rode back, dowry and truth reclaimed, not by blood, but by the bride who collapsed at a rancher's door and refused to be silent. The woman didn't speak for the next day and a half. She lay curled in the spare bed of the ranch house, a thin quilt drawn to her chin. Her hands trembled even when there was no wind. Levi kept the fire stoked and a bowl of broth nearby, and spoke softly when he came in. But mostly he didn't speak at all. He'd seen skittish horses calm down faster than her. Once, during the second night, he found her staring at the door as if expecting it to burst open. He didn't ask, didn't pry, but he did something most men wouldn't. He removed his boots before walking across the wooden floor, so his footsteps wouldn't echo. On the third morning, she finally spoke. "I didn't run away," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "He told me to go." Levi, sitting by the stove sharpening his knife, paused. He didn't look at her, not right away. "Who's he?" he asked gently. "My husband," she said, a thread of shame lacing the word. Levi finally turned. "You're married." Her eyes filled with something, grief or guilt, he couldn't tell. "Not like you'd think. It wasn't real. It was an agreement. My father gave me to him because of a debt. He was older, mean. I was to be his wife. But he knew I hated it. He said I was cold. That he didn't want a woman who looked like she was always running. Levi stood slowly, set the knife down. The room felt heavier. I'm not going to judge what you did or didn't agree to, he said. You're safe here. She looked down. I don't even know your name. Levi Brooks, he said. Rancher, horseman, terrible cook. A faint smile touched her lips for the first time. Anna, she whispered. My name's Anna. It was the first true thing she'd said since the moment she collapsed at his door. By late afternoon, she was able to walk out to the porch. Her dress was still torn and dirty, but she didn't seem to care. She sat in the chair Levi kept there for watching storms, and closed her eyes when the breeze came. Smells like rain, she said. Always does before it clears, Levi replied from the steps. He had a knife in one hand and a chunk of wood in the other. He wasn't carving anything in particular, just passing time. I used to dream of open land, she said suddenly. When I was a girl, I thought it would mean freedom. But open land just means no one hears you scream. Levi didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to. Instead, he said, There's a rule here. You only stay if you want to. Anna looked over. What if I don't know what I want? Then you stay until you do. She stared at him for a long time. And for once, she didn't flinch when a bird startled from the tree nearby. Her shoulders didn't jerk at every gust of wind. She was still scared. But she wasn't running. Not yet. Just resting. That night, as the sun began to set behind the hills, Levi noticed something strange. A black shape on the horizon. Not a bird. Not a wild animal. A rider. Fast. He stood up from the fence where he'd been checking wire. Anna saw him tense and stepped out onto the porch, a bowl in her hands. Levi grabbed his rifle. Go inside, he said firmly. Now. Anna didn't argue. She dropped the bowl and ducked behind the doorframe. The rider slowed as he got closer, dust rising behind him. Levi watched his posture, his hand near the hip. But the man didn't reach for a weapon. He raised a hand instead. Peaceful. When he finally came into view, Levi recognized the gray beard first. Then the eyes. Samuel Klein, Levi muttered. I'll be damned. The man reined in his horse. Levi Brooks, he said with a half-smile. Still out here with nothing but dust and your stubbornness. Levi lowered the rifle, but not all the way. What do you want? Samuel dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. I'm not here to fight, just to ask if you've seen a girl. Young. Brown hair. Wears a ribbon around her wrist. Levi narrowed his eyes. What if I have? Then you've got something that doesn't belong to you. From behind the door, Anna made a soft, sharp sound. Levi turned his head. Is he the one? She didn't answer with words. She didn't have to. The way her face drained of color told Levi everything. He turned back to Samuel, jaw tight. Anna's not property, Levi said. And she's not going back. Samuel's eyes sharpened. That girl owes me 5 years of labor. Her father and I made an agreement. Then take it up with her father. I intend to, Samuel spat. But she's mine until then. No, Levi said flatly. She's not. The sun dipped just below the horizon. The wind picked up, and the truth came with it. The ridge wind had finally stilled by dawn, leaving the world hushed under a pale, brittle light. Levi rode out alone. Anna perched behind him on Ember's back. Her shawl had been replaced by his thick wool coat, and her ribbon, once tied around her wrist, now fluttered from the saddle horn. Neither spoke as they crested the hill overlooking Samuel Klein's homestead, a cluster of weathered boards and sagging porches ringing with desperate purpose. Below, Anna's father paced the yard, lantern dangling from one hand, shotgun in the other. His shoulders were bowed by regret or shame. Levi couldn't tell which. Levi guided Ember into the corral, dismounting without ceremony. Anna slipped off behind him, boots sinking into the cold earth. Pa! Anna called softly. Her voice carried across the frost-stiff grass. John Weston froze, shotgun lowering an inch. He stared at Anna's face, pale but resolute, then at Levi. Guilt and disbelief warred in his eyes. "Anna," he whispered, "is that really you?" She took a shaky step forward. "Pa, I told you my debt's paid. I'm free." Her gaze flicked to Levi. "I'm safe." John's lip trembled. He looked at Levi, then at the crumpled ledger clutched in his trembling hand. The page where Samuel had scrawled 5 years' labor in exchange for Weston assets, now torn and stained, lay open at his feet. Samuel Klein emerged from the door, shoulders squared. He carried himself like a man who performed favors yet believed he could call them back. His shotgun rested against his hip. "Your debt stands, Weston," he said, voice rough as the barn's planks. "And your daughter knows it." Anna's father looked between the two men, memories of desperation flickering in his eyes. Mortgage duns, court summons, the cooled embers of the family fortune. He straightened, a shudder passing through him. I thought I did right. I thought." He shook his head, tears pooling. "I lost sight of what mattered." Anna pressed closer to Levi's side. Levi set a hand on her waist. Anna inhaled sharply, as if drawing strength from his presence. Samuel spat into the dirt. "I'll take the girl. And the wages owed." Levi's hand drifted to his rifle, but he didn't draw. He studied Samuel's face, saw fear flicker beneath the bravado. "The ledger's torn," Levi said quietly. "The debt is erased." Samuel's jaw dropped, then clenched. He yanked the paper from John's fingers. "This is mutilated. Worthless." Anna stepped forward. "Pa gave his word and I gave mine. You can't cheat a promise with a knife." John Weston, his hands trembling, retrieved the torn edges and pressed them together. The inked scrawl formed again. 5 years, 5 signatures, 5 vigilant witnesses. He cleared his throat. "Samuel, I'm no longer asking for mercy. I'm telling you, she's free." Samuel's shotgun weighed in his grip. He glanced at Levi's steady gaze, at Anna's unwavering stance. Around them, the dusty porch boards seemed to hold their breath. Finally, Samuel shrugged. "Then I'll collect my pay another way." He turned and stalked inside, slamming the door so hard it shook the frame. Anna exhaled, shoulders sagging. John trembled. Levi placed a protective hand on Anna's shoulder, and she leaned into him as if anchoring her fears. Morning light bathed the corral as Levi led Ember past the porches. The West had taught him many lessons. Nothing good came easy. Trust was a gamble, justice was seldom kind. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. He looked at Anna. Fragile, fierce, no longer the trembling bride who collapsed at his door, but a woman reborn by her own resolve. Levi squared his shoulders. "Samuel understand in time," he said softly. Anna shrugged. "Or he won't. But I don't owe him anything more." Her voice gained strength. "I owe you." Levi blinked. "I did what any man would." She shook her head. "No. You did what few men dare." He met her eyes and saw gratitude, trust, and something deeper. Love's first inkling, unspoken but palpable. He nodded, tipping his hat. Behind them, John Weston approached, shoulders straighter now. He placed a rough hand on Levi's arm. "Thank you, Levi, for everything." Levi nodded again, words caught in his throat. Outside, Ember pawed the ground, impatient for the trail home. Levi led Anna onto the porch, where she paused, looking back at the homestead that had rejected her. She lifted her chin. "This place nearly killed me," she said, "but you gave me life." Levi drew her into an embrace. She rested her head against his coat, and for a moment, the wind slipped back into the world, carrying the last echoes of violence away. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Levi and Anna rode away together. The plains stretched before them, endless and forgiving. Ember's hooves clopped a steady rhythm, and Anna held Levi's arm, ribbon unfurled and dancing behind her. They paused at a rocky overlook, where the horizon melted into gold. Levi slid from the saddle, helped Anna down, and together they watched the sunset spill fire across the sky. Anna closed her eyes. "The truth came at sunset," she whispered. "Not with guns or threats, but with honesty." Levi smiled. "Truth's the only thing a man can rely on." She turned to him. "Then give me your truth." He took her hand. "I'll give you my life." The sun sank behind the hills, and the world grew soft in its passing. Beneath that vast canopy, two souls, one a wanderer, one a bride, found their own horizon. No debts lingered in the dying light, only possibility. And as the final rays faded, Levi lifted Anna into his arms and carried her to where a new beginning awaited. One built on mercy, courage, and the unbreakable promise born when a bride collapsed outside a rancher's door and a man chose to keep her safe.